And welcome back to Reality with the Reality Hub. Well, Rob, it's been a little while since we were on air, or since we recorded, hasn't it?
It has indeed, and it's been even longer since we've actually come face to face, in person, in real life.
I know, there's been all that mucking around with the online platforms that connect us, which, have been okay. But here we are, in all places, the Ponsonby Food Court, on Ponsonby Road, on the roof, looking out over the rumbling traffic of 6:25 p.m. on a Monday night, and it's good. It's good. It's good to be live.
Yeah. By the way, we're not on the roof.
Well, okay, all right. We're on the deck.
Technically, yeah, we're on the deck, which is a really nice place to be on a beautiful day, which it was today. Although the sun is about to set, so it's getting a little bit cooler. But I feel like spring is on its way. Today I felt really good. Had great training. I felt like something activated, and I find that happens at a certain point of time as the weather switches and changes. You sort of feel that warmth coming, and and
did it give you a boost in energy?
It did, and I notice. I'm one of these guys that notices the trees around where I live. So when I go on my walks, I can see the first signs of spring and growth and life, and it's always that to me tells me yes, nature is starting to spring into life, and I always find that beautiful. I wonder how many people actually notice that, like actually are not looking down at their phones or distracted by all these other things in life, but actually, and I do this a lot, I actually just stare at the tree and try and connect with it, and it's going to be, people are going to go, this is such woo woo, but it's just being present with it and just feeling it, and whatever you feel is you feel and go, wow, that's an incredible natural living being that's doing its thing all on its own, and it's just, it blows my mind sometimes, man. It really does, because it's natural, and for me it's real, and for me it goes on. It reminds me of this life force that is ever present and always there, but we don't often acknowledge it.
That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And that's part of the natural life force of this quantum soup that we are evolving within.
Yeah, because you can take it further and go, well, actually, I'm a part of that. I'm a living, breathing example of that. And then so is this entire planet, and the ecosystem and all the natural. And I was thinking about this today after my training. I was thinking, we've been so bombarded lately of the stuff that's been going on. I don't know if you know what's been going on in the world lately.
I don't pay attention to it. What's been going on in the world, mate?
2020. And all the stuff that's been happening surrounding the big P word.
Yeah. And people thought it was bad when Prince died.
And I had this sort of realization where it was like, far out. Like, you can get so absorbed into that mind space. Yeah. And yet there's this whole other space that you can sort of operate in, the natural space. And that's why I always say it's so important to get out in nature and to kind of detune from it and get back into a natural, organic environment, like the waves and the fresh air and the sunshine, and go, well, that's just
all the things you're not supposed to do in a lockdown.
Yeah, apparently, yeah. Where did I read somewhere that finally they conceded that yes, vitamin C and getting out in the fresh air and going outdoors and exercise,
it's actually good for you.
That's actually good for you. What? How's that?
No, that's bullshit. That can't be right.
Yeah, it's fake news. I'm sure it's fake news.
Fake freaking news.
Yeah, if it makes you feel good and it's natural and it's kind of the thing that feels right, it's got to be fake, right?
No, if it feels right, that can't be good.
Yeah.
No, if it feels right, that's got to be the devil. And Catholicism taught us this. So if it feels right and there's no guilt, it's probably not good.
Yeah, one of those mind programs.
Yeah, you need to be reprogrammed.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the interesting things that have happened of late. We've, of course, Richard got out of his lockdown, and we've got to catch up with him.
He's free.
I still actually need to edit the other finish editing his episode. So even before you hear this, that one's going to go up on air, and then this will follow. So if you have been listening in sequential order, you've already heard that episode, and it's been great. So because I've been traveling a lot, so my apologies to our faithful listeners in Uruguay and Chile for not constantly coming out with more stuff. Well, this is cool. Because we've had a lot of experiences with the different gear we've used for this podcast, and I think we finally found a few things that are working. Yeah, and this travel rig's really nice. I know for those of you who are into audio, that's cool. For those of you who aren't, it doesn't matter. But I guess it's part of our journey as podcasters, and part of my literal journey in travel in my job for work has been travelling on planes during this time when people are going on board with masks.
Yeah.
And everyone on public transport has to be wearing a mask. And the first few flights that I did around the country for my job had me in my own row on the plane.
Right.
Which was only 2 seats either side of the aisle. And
because there's like 3. These planes are quite small. The domestic.
The ones I've been travelling on have been.
Yeah.
Like the Auckland to Wellington, Auckland to Christchurch, or Auckland to Dunedin ones. They're quite big.
Right.
They're like a proper big plane.
So like 3 seats aisle, then 3 seats.
They can be.
Yeah,
absolutely. But these little ones, they're like ATR 72s, which are the multi-prop plane, and you've basically got this tiny little runway, and you, if you open the upper carry-on cabin luggage, you get whack in the head because it's such a small little space, and you enter from the rear of these planes. So this is something I've come to learn, and for those of you who travel a lot, do take note of the type of plane you're on. It'll be on your ticket information, because if it's an ATR 72, you want a seat at the back of the plane versus the front, because the best seats are at the back because you get to leave quickly.
Yeah, you can escape out the rear entry.
That's right, out the rear entry, as all escaping should be done.
Normally,
but also you enter there. So
you, because I haven't travelled anywhere, even around the country. I used to do a lot, you know, before that, but not during this whole crazy pandemic thing. What's the feeling like? What's the mood, and what's the whole? Run us through that.
It's quite interesting because you couldn't have anyone sitting next to you unless they were your partner,
right?
Or in your bubble or family.
Yeah,
and that meant this is so that you're not right next to the people you're travelling with, right? Instead, they're in the seat in front of you. So if you look to your left or your right, you'll notice that you and the person to your right or your left, they are in the window seat. So you are as far as possible from them as you can, because you're in the window seat on the other side.
Right.
But the person in front of you is about 27 inches away. I mean, 27 centimetres. They're less than standard 30 centimetre ruler from your head to their head. And so it's so stupid.
And what was the made-up distance that they created?
2 meters,
was
right?
it 2 meters, right?
So
that was the standard.
You are 2
rule.
meters if you reach your hands out laterally.
But when are you ever?
You're a foot from the person in front of you.
Yeah, you're never ever going to be in the.
I don't even stand that close to people in queues, even before COVID. So this is just so silly.
I know. Look, we would off air before this. I was just talking about the logic of everything. That things just do not make sense. And I know in the grand scheme of things that these measures were put in to try and make some sort of impact and try and mitigate. But I watch the UFC, and for anyone who knows, the UFC is a big sporting event, mixed martial arts, but they have a face-off, like a weigh-in, and then they get really in your face, but they wear masks, right? So that's all cool, right? Okay,
sure,
face.
Sure.
But as soon as they step into the cage, there's grappling involved. You're basically licking ears, and you're breathing. You're hugging, you're clinching, So it just
a regular
makes
night on K Road.
Yeah. If anyone understands, like wrestling, think of 2 people wrestling on the ground. And I'm just thinking, what's the point of even wearing them? And then the ring announcer wears the mask, takes it off, and then puts it back on. It just seems so stupid. And it's the same at the start of, I think it was the Tour de France. I think I caught some action. And it's like, well, they don't wear them while they're actually out riding, obviously. That would be crazy. But you're shoulder to shoulder, you bump, like it just makes no sense to me at all.
I think it's a farce because you're this far from people left and right of you, but you're this close to the person in front of you, much, much shorter distance. You're breathing right in their air space, and whether you like it or not, the air goes out of the side of the mask and it wafts around you, and the person next to you breathes it, and this is easy enough for any virus to pass through, and the masks don't actually hold it back. And then after all of that, after all this play of, well, wear masks but be right in front of each other, and then as you exit the plane, you've got to wait for the person behind you to get up and leave, and then when they've walked off, then you can get up and grab your overhead luggage, and then when you've walked off, then the person after you can.
So it's a really fast process of getting out of the plane.
Oh, it's super slow, and you're looking across at the person in your opposite aisle on your seat on the other side.
Oh, sorry, do you go? I mean,
and you've got this mask sort of thing over your face, and you're staring at them, and they can't see your face to read your lips and go, "Yeah, you go, mate." And instead, you're looking at them with bright wide eyes, going, "It's so silly." And you've been packed in real close. I'll do it again. You've been packed in real close, and then you give the impression that you're keeping a distance as you leave. It's just silly.
It is, and it just, there's so many. I mean, that's just one example. And the other example is I've noticed people seem to be really adhering to wearing masks in supermarkets, right?
I've
noticed that.
Well, I've been in the South Island and other parts of the North Island, so
and that's cool.
have they in Auckland?
Yeah, but then there's this whole thing. You go into another store, or get even close, and people don't think, no, you don't need to do it there or in a cafe or anywhere else where there's public, but do it in the supermarkets. And I'm going, there's this mentality, it's just so weird. I don't know, it's just,
I'll tell you another.
I can't figure it out, but I am literally, I start to just, and this is no offense to real danger and real fear, but I start to actually laugh.
No
offence
to fear? You mean like you're not trying to offend anyone who is genuinely facing a real threat?
Yeah, a real threat, yeah.
Okay.
But this whole mask thing, it's become a bit of a
joke.
A bit of a joke.
I'll tell you what the biggest joke of it all is in a second, and you've probably caught this in the news. But before I do, you know what I'm talking about, and everyone does by the time they've heard this.
Yes,
it'll be all the rage. I've been seeing, for my normal job, I haven't mentioned this a lot on the show, but I go see medical professionals, and I walk into their place of work, and I knock on the door and I go, "Hey, it's me from XYZ company, and I've just come to visit you about such and such. I do have a mask if you would like me to put it on." And bearing in mind, right, up on the door, there's a big QR code, and it says, "Visitors must not enter if you are sick." Some of the places say, "Call ahead, do not come inside if you haven't got an appointment." Some of them don't, so I can go into those ones, or I call ahead from outside. But they go through all of this process. There's the QR code scanning business, there's the signing in, and I knock on the door and come in, and I go, "Hi there, it's me from such and such company, and I do have a mask if you would like me to put one on." And they go, "No, we don't worry about that here." It's after everything that's been on the door. It's after all the Christmas decorations and signage of all that sort of playing the game.
And I mean, let's be honest, let's get real. How many people actually notice there are so many signs? We get bombarded with signs. I remember way back at school there'd be signs and you just ignore them,
It just becomes wallpaper that you don't read.
Exactly.
Because maybe it's not that real. And I mean, I'm not trying to throw a cat amongst the pigeons again and just be a contrarian for the sake of it. But if the person telling us that it really is dangerous at regular 1 p.m. meetings in Parliament, our great Prime Minister is out on the weekend on the campaign trail holding up a camera, and she's photographed doing a selfie with about 15 people packed in closer to her than an airplane.
What? No, you're kidding.
Surrounded by people smiling and laughing as she holds up the camera, does the selfie, does the duck lips, hey!
It's like Alan did that at the
because
Emmys or something.
This is I know.
Was it Emmys?
But it's an incredibly smart virus. It knows that it will not affect people during the Labour campaign trail.
Or doing selfies.
All doing
Yeah,
selfies
no,
if you're the
of
Prime
course.
Minister
Yes,
that's
yes.
making everyone wear a mask,
Yeah.
except in the photos for her benefit.
I know. And
So is she afraid of it? Nah.
look, I mean, and it's obvious. If you just use your common sense and logic, and I've brought this up before where our, and I forget his title, but Bloomfield, the person who addresses the nation at 1 p.m. and who we should, see as a figure that we can trust, who's an expert, who's got this high level position of addressing the public. And when he says of himself that, and he's said this before, that masks don't really work,
Yeah, he said it.
he said it. I mean,
And
you
to
can
his-
YouTube it. It's
To
there.
his credit.
Yeah.
He said that.
Yeah,
to his credit.
and there was that other situation where I mentioned on one of our other previous episodes, the whole thing about, well, we're just going to, someone died, but it wasn't through COVID and they tested negative, but we'll add it as another COVID. It's just like, well,
Yeah.
can you not, join the dots a little and go, hang on a minute, all the numbers are so inaccurate, so inflated, and you can do your research to figure out why that happens and why that is, dig a little deeper on that one. But you just start to see, you just sort of take those steps back and go, yeah, just use your common sense. Use a little bit of logic and see it for what it is.
Yeah.
Just see it for what it is. There's been enough time now for that to be obvious, in my opinion.
So, speaking of time, speaking of... Well, we weren't speaking of this, going to say it though. Speaking of all things coming out in time, apparently between 1976 and 2007, at the boarding school I went to, Dilworth School for Boys, there was a lot of kiddie fiddling going on, and it's pretty disgusting. And we all knew about it. We all talked and saw firsthand ourselves the way teachers were perhaps a little inappropriate with some students. And maybe we didn't all see that out in the open all the time, but we saw certain behaviours that raised an eyebrow but then seemed to be normal.
Yeah.
But then we would see and hear from someone who comes back and says to his friends, well, I just had a meeting with my parent, with the headmaster, and I complained with my parent that I've been touched inappropriately in ways that concern me. But not at that point abused, but just sort of approached in ways that concern me from XYZ teacher. And the headmaster says to the parent, you need to withdraw your child from the school now.
Wow.
Not, we're going to look into this. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. So I've refrained from using names and I
Yeah.
I'm careful as much as I can be about that situation. But that stuff, even as minor as that story is, has been shocking to hear, because when you heard about it back in those days, you went, geez, that's maybe the student's a bit of a, maybe the school actually really wants to get rid of the student because this is just the student doesn't behave well, so this person's a troublemaker. For all we know, maybe he's lied in his reflection of how the story is being relayed to a bunch of other students, and you hear about it as a 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old and go, oh yeah, whatever. But hearing it now through the lens of 2020, you go, you reawaken to it and go, oh, that's shocking. That's not how it should be.
Yeah, yes and no. Shocking because for those, I guess, shocking absolutely, because any time someone is subjugated to anything that is inappropriate, or you don't have any free will in that situation, or where authority is being abused, power, and when you're what ages would you say, 13, 14, 15?
Well, I went there at from the age of 11 and left.
11, okay, so that's young. When you
Form 1 to Form 7 as it was in those days, so 11 to 17, 18.
Think back to when you were that age and how aware you were, and how
You didn't know anything.
You didn't know anything, exactly. So you couldn't really. Who could you talk to? I mean, how could you? It would be something that I guess you would just put under the carpet, that you would hide, that you wouldn't be comfortable talking about. And if you did try and raise it, then how do you raise it? And I think that kind of environment was set up in a way where that was maybe was normalized. That's just the way it was, part of your upbringing.
Well, if you think about talk about a raft of things being normalised that were inappropriate.
Yeah.
I mean, for that school and for other schools of the boarding school tradition, there was a thing called fagging. And fagging had nothing to do with homosexuality.
Yeah.
It was actually a British boarding school tradition where a senior student would take on almost like this young 11-year-old new intern student, new entry student, as his... I hate to use the phrase, but it's true in so many ways, as his bitch.
Bitch, yeah.
Yeah,
they call it hazing in America, I believe.
Well, that's another thing too, but that's going through a ritual sort of painful experience.
Maybe a little bit different.
In this instance, your little fag, and it had a different meaning then to the way that word is now, would be either the kid that endured the bullshit and the shit that you dished out as a senior to him, or it was the lucky kid that felt like he just gained an older brother who looked after him,
right?
And you didn't know what that guy was going to be like to you. And no, that was the tradition prior to me coming to Dilworth, and we heard stories of how we've done well, things have changed. It was tough in the years gone by before you came here. You've got it good. We've stopped the institutions like fagging. It's not appropriate that kids are treated and abused sort of like in a bully fashion in front of others and normalised.
Yeah.
That's going to stop now. I mean, it could have gone well for a kid or it could have gone badly, depending on what the guy was like.
Yeah.
But that's the environment from which stemmed the boarding school life. You would go home to your boarding house at 3 p.m. on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or whatever time school finished, right? And you couldn't get away from your students that were your fellow classmates or from other year groups that were near enough to you. You had to exist amongst them. So unlike a normal school where you can leave at the end of school and go home and get away from it all, you were stuck in it 24/7. I think the modern equivalent of that is called Facebook, where you're stuck on it 24/7. But the prior version was physically being around people constantly. So if you didn't get on well with people, that's a tough road to hoe, and a road I had to relate to. It was a tough road for me. I did not have a good time there. But so that's the environment in which you're in. And if there are, I guess, and I'm just speculating because that court case is all going to come out, and it's known that 7 men who were there during that time frame that I mentioned before have been arrested and have been charged and may be about to face a court case, and there's a process that's happening in October. That's all coming out, and I'm not surprised because I saw the sort of things that people did. And while I don't, and no one officially knows the names, but people have told me things, but whilst I don't officially know who those 7 people are, I'll be really interested to see if ever there was a cover-up of the style and kind I described earlier. And that was just a legendary story. I wasn't there when when it happened. I was told that that's what happened, but you hear things. And I actually worry that some of the suicides and things that have taken place from those old boys may have come because of events like that. You just don't know.
You mean the victims?
Yeah.
Both sides?
Look, I mean, we have a high suicide rate in New Zealand, and I believe some of the old boys have been very much mentally affected by something in their lives, because not everyone has gone on to live a happy life.
We call it trauma, right?
Yeah.
And we've talked about this. I've talked about this numerous times. Childhood trauma, in whatever form that manifests, we don't have we don't have a way of coping with it in that immediate when it happens. So what we do is we repress it, we put it aside, and it doesn't get dealt with, and it doesn't heal. So it kind of sits there. Like, think of it as stored energy, traumatic energy, and the brain can actually switch off from it, and it cannot remember it. And that's why they do all that psychotherapy and regression and stuff, because it can manifest later on in life and it can have a real huge impact on. I mean, you often hear of people that commit crimes or are abusive. They actually went through that themselves.
That's right.
And then it starts to manifest. So I'm not an expert on it, but I know enough to know that we needed to do a lot of healing as we grow older, and we got to look at our stuff. I was on Unicorns and Hand Grenades, and we talked about this.
Oh,
shout
right,
out to Jackie and Kim.
Shout out to
Thank
Jackie
you for
Kim.
having me. Yeah. And we talked about that stuff, how, you know, it's very much the road less traveled, where we start to look back at some of the stuff that really impacted our lives.
Yeah.
And we never really dealt with it. And because we never really dealt with it, then at some point it's going to rise up. It's like pushing that tennis ball from the top of the water down, and it's going to pop up at some point.
It's the returning energy.
Yeah, it's the returning.
And some would say it's the returning energy of karmic justice.
Yes. Yeah. It's a good way. Yeah.
What was it you were saying before we started about that we are now in times where evil is coming to light? And it's a simplistic way of putting it, but I think I know exactly. Well, that's the way I put it. But I know what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this in recent times, that a lot of the dark stuff, the stuff that's been in the shadows, is starting to lift, starting to come into light. We're shining lights into those areas and going, hang on a minute. What's really, and we're starting to deal with it, and that's kind of the energy, and that's kind of part of the process which I feel is happening. And so it didn't surprise me when you mentioned that story, because there's a lot of that stuff happening around the world.
What I'm pleased to note is that if these people are found to be guilty for crimes of systemic cultural, I guess culture might not be the right word, but a systemic offending amongst children in school over a period of years, then given the ages that they're at, which is retirement age and well into their retirement years, they may spend the rest of their lives in jail, potentially, depending on what they've done. And I think it's great because they were such well-to-do type of upper crust sort of people, because they were private school teachers, and it meant so much to them to be seen as important, upstanding, respected members of society. Those fuckers can have it right back up their own ass and be known for what they truly are, and I think it's wonderful. It's really great.
Yeah, just because you hold a title or you have, you know, like, I know exactly what you're describing. That's not character. That's not your character, you know. There's something deeper that goes on with that. And so far out.
I wanted to say about it too, Rob, when you look at the institution of a boarding school and you look at, well, it's just the perfect recipe, isn't it, for someone who is that way inclined, who has pedophilic tendencies to want to, you know, approach little boys or girls. And you think, well, the teaching institution is rife and ripe for it. It's just the perfect opportunity for someone who's that way inclined to get into it. And in this scenario, you've got Dilworth School for boys, which is a private school for kids who got in on a scholarship. Every single one of those kids, myself included, back in 1986, got into the school for up to 7 years to go Form 1 to Form 7, whatever year that is these days, from 11 to 17, 18 years of age, at a phenomenal sum of money that you didn't have to pay. A phenomenal sum of money was spent on you. You arrive from some poor, impoverished family, which has to be a solo parent scenario or similar, one of need. You're assessed in an interview process amongst possibly 100 or so or more kids who got through to this level, next level, next level. You've turned up to an assessment day at one point and run around a track and spoken to people and been interviewed with your parent and on your own and see how you go. You finally make it through into a class of 30 kids or something. And on your first day of arrival, you put your own clothes in a cubby hole and you're issued 2 pairs of pajamas, 6 pairs of undies, 3 pairs of grey shorts and shirts that you wear that get rotated and matron takes every morning to go to, you're up in the morning, you're doing, this is an opportunity of a lifetime. You're living now 3 square meals a day, whereas maybe before you were lucky if you got 1. Plus, afternoon tea. You're given every textbook, computer that you'll need personally issued to you. Nowadays, we didn't have computers then, but you'd be given a laptop, you'd be given textbooks, you'd be given pens and stationery, the whole lot, right down to your shoes, right? And then one day, someone fiddles with you and you complain, and your parent has to make a really awful decision. Do we go to the headmaster to tell them what little Johnny's been going through, what he's been crying about on his one day at home a week? Or do we say, hey, buddy, is it really that bad? Because if this means you have to leave the school because you get kicked out for telling the truth, it's not like I pay $20,000 a year for you, or $20,000 a term for you to be here. I mean, it's either this life and putting up with this, or maybe you got to go back to South Auckland where we live, and your best chances are never going to be as good as it could be. So these poor families are actually facing a scenario of having to decide over what potentially might be a compromise of their beliefs to accept or ignore, because it's not like they're the rich families who go, excuse me, I've had complaints and I will withdraw my funding. And they go, well, we'll act on it right away, sir. We shall investigate. So what a great environment for pedophiles to go, and I won't get caught.
I'm just digesting that. A lot of things came up for me there. I mean, the way you were describing it sounds more like an institution to me.
Well, it felt like a prison to me.
Yeah, a prison. I've said that before.
Yeah.
I mean, far out. It's a schooling, when I look back, and I've said this before, it's a system and it's an institution where you go to be programmed by teachers that were programmed before you, and it serves a certain level. It's a mind program. It's a certain level of intellect, but I don't know if school has evolved or changed, but there's this whole other real world out there where you learn the real stuff, the real school of life. And but I've seen it as, obviously, it's a stage of your journey and development. So you just expected to go to school. I know a lot of people now do homeschooling, and that there are other ways of finding an education. But that's the institution that's been around for how long that we just send our kids to.
Well, since the industrial era.
Get an education. And an education was always rammed down our throat as a way of getting a good job or making a better living.
That's right.
And yes, knowledge is power, yes, but knowledge comes in many different forms, in many different levels. Yeah. So it's not just intellectual knowledge. It's not just being able to recite what happened in 1819, whatever. Yeah. We're talking, there's
rote knowledge.
Yeah, rote knowledge, where the exam systems are set up where if you could just repeat back what you were downloaded, then you get some good grades.
And then forget it a week later.
Exactly.
And have no actual practical application of the knowledge you could repeat for one test.
Yeah, and I'm not just bagging the school system, because I know there are a lot of people out there that really enjoyed school and got a lot out of it. But I know that I did get a lot out of it, because I realized for me it wasn't what I want. I didn't like it. I suffered at school because of that. Something within me rebelled against all of that and saw that there was just an aspect of my being literally was allergic to it. I can't quite explain it, but I got very sick, and that's another story. But getting back to this whole situation with people in authority and people that are in these situations of power, I mean, at what level do they actually look at themselves and go, what am I doing here? Is this right or wrong? Well, what's the defining sort of line? Where is the moral compass? And the wheels of justice do seem to turn quite slow, so it's only just sort of coming up now. But it almost seemed, I'm a believer that,
these birds are coming home to roost.
Yeah, I'm a believer that whether you believe in karma or however, that whatever energy you put out there is going to come back around in some form. That the truth somehow finds its way into the light. And Yeah, so it's a tough one, man. It's a tough. It's a tough for anyone. Yeah, for anyone who's gone through that experience. That's it's a traumatic experience like that. You know, I sympathise and you. I guess the healing, you know, comes in many different forms, and hopefully you can find your way to self-healing and realise that you were coping and doing the best you could, and at that particular moment.
Yeah.
And because I know a lot of people can be hard on themselves and can look back and go, shit, you know, I could have done this or I should have said that, and yeah.
that school, from my perspective, is a real boiling pot of extremes, because it sets up a scenario where great pain can exist, and for some people great pleasure perhaps, or great extremes. That's maybe the better way of putting it. It sets up a scenario of great extremes, because for those who succeeded, you lived high on the hog of popularity. Whether you were the prefect guitar playing first 15 rugby captain who was, you know, super popular and in all the school productions, or whether you're at the bottom of the pick, afraid to enter a room because you knew that the moment you went in, people would turn on you and abuse you and name call, and you tried to get around the place with your head down. It was an environment of extremes. I mean, from arriving for the first time, being ripped from your home, to those first nights as an 11-year-old kid having homesickness and crying through the night. It's set up right from the beginning for just pain for a little young sensitive soul. Yeah. And there will be some who cope with that, and some who at that school who were so psychologically damaged from their environment that they were scarred to that sort of thing, you know.
Yeah.
And it went so many different directions in terms of extremes.
Right.
But I remember, and I wanted to say, I had a Facebook exchange with someone on one of the old boy group Facebook threads, and amongst all of this news of abuse that came out, he wrote, "Remember where your childhood was forged, boys. The times where in the evenings we would go out and sneak into such and such to get some of the biscuits from the tuck shop. Remember the time we would play lightsabers behind the chapel till it went dark. Remember the good old times with the cricket and the ball and the this and the that, and stubbing your toe, but first aid was available, and da-da-da-da, and you know, these are the days that forged our lives." And I said, "Hey bro, so you're one of the lucky ones. You had a good run." And I wrote my experience down, and it was just truthful and honest. And I said, this experience, my shitty experience, taught me a lot about the darkness of humanity.
Yeah.
For going all those years without the friendship and camaraderie that you've just described.
Yeah.
And he actually wrote, keep your negative judgmental stuff to yourself. And I responded with, "Hey man, I know that on these forums it's hard to see the tone of the person you're talking to when they're speaking from the heart. If only we were having a beer together and you'd know that I was just telling you the truth about my experience." And he did an about tail on it and went, "Oh no, I respect that, fair enough. I acknowledge your experience is different." Because my point is, and this guy said, those were the best days of our lives. And I wrote, "My friend, if those are the best days of your lives, the best days of your life, what have you got left to look forward to?" And my thought was, you might as well end it now. I didn't say that.
Right.
But if the worst days of your life are behind you, then the alternative view is the best days are left to tread, and that's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. Everyone's going to have their own different account and different experience, particularly in those formative years. And whilst you were relating that whole story, it popped into my head a Bruce Springsteen quote from one of his songs, and it's, I quote, "I learnt more from a 3-minute record than I ever learned at school," and that says it all for me, because I could learn more from a Bruce Springsteen song about real life and about love and about friendship and about honor and all those things, you know, and about the dark stuff as well from a 3-minute record. Music for the soul. But yeah, what was I going to say? It's if those are the best days of your life, then far out. I mean, you can create the best days of your life at any particular moment, and they can be ahead of time, you know, they can still be coming, or maybe you know,
right.
you go through peaks and troughs. But I think what I was going to say is that whenever you go through something that's challenging, like a period that people are going through now, how can you alchemize that? How can you use that for your benefit and find the seeds of wisdom? And that's how I would turn it around. I would go, well, those could be your formative years in a negative aspect, but you can turn it around by becoming a confident, empowered individual, someone who's successful on your own merits and
overcomes
not
all that.
Become not remain the victim and go, well, or it could be the other way where I had all the praise and all the notoriety and I was amazing at school, and then in the real world you lose that, or where's the system, you know, and then it goes the other way. So
well, no, let me just further expand on that. And I know that you share beliefs that are at least compatible with what I'm going to describe in some way. Philosophically, I think we plan the life ahead before we're born. It's just the way I see it. It's the way I've seen it for a long time since being introduced to that idea. And because I believe in a spiritual type of afterlife and multiple reincarnations, I think we get an opportunity to look ahead at what could come and be the challenges ahead, and to accept that that's what we'll go through. And in my soul's wisdom, I must have hacked up the shit right at the beginning of my life, so that I would have some of the heartbreaking experiences that it's possible to have for my soul's journey at this time, to set me up to be as fucked up and as you know, gnarled up and distorted as I could be, and cope with it, so that when I overcome those things, they are a far greater joy. So that when I overcome the challenges of lack of confidence, it's a far greater achievement. And to know that I went through all that incredibly dark period of my life, literally 7 years without a friend at high school, and yet today I have great friends, you know, that I surround myself with.
Yeah.
I happen to run an incredible podcast with one of those friends, and you know, I'm more outgoing than you could have imagined that I would have been at school. I don't believe any of those students, if they'd even remember who I was, would go, yeah, we pegged you to be an actor. Not at all, because I didn't have the guts to even be in a school play, you know.
Yeah.
And so I overcame all of that, and I did the whole drama school thing, and it was actually an incredible setup to then overcome those, and I did, and I'm really super proud of that. So, you know, life has been what it's meant to have been. And from that greater perspective, I hold no grudges to the universe at all. Yeah. But I'm excited about people being brought to justice.
Sure, yeah.
But on a boom shanker level, I also thank them for playing that role, because ultimately they knew and they would have contracted to have been brought to justice. Yeah,
from that perspective, it was contracted and, you know, it was preordained. And I call it your life themes, like your life challenges or themes. Or, you know, it's like the titles of the chapter of your story of your life, and you have these themes that you need to work through. And you should be proud of your younger self. You can tell your younger self, you know, how good, how amazing that you pulled through that you learned from that you grew from that you kept evolving, and you got to this stage. And you got to remember that nothing is final in life. You know, no feeling is final. We go through these challenges, and we, you know, when you think you've got it all sorted out, another challenge comes along, and
the depth of this pain gives greater joy to when you overcome it.
That's exactly right. You know, some of the people that go through the worst experiences, the most traumatic events, often what happens is they go deeper into them and they expand more. They become bigger and larger, and they realize there's so much more on every level. So often the people that have been through the most traumatic experiences are the wisest souls, and the most have the most depth
The most fucked up people are the most interesting.
And the most interesting
when
as
they've
well.
come out as normal human beings.
And let's face it, we all go through that shit. It's part of being human. We've all gone through stuff. We'll keep going through stuff. And, but it can happen early on in your life. It can happen, mid-life. It can happen at the end. It can happen at any stage. But you'd like to hope, and this is one of the things of this reality, that there's always an alter ego. So whatever suffering you go through, know that there's going to be some joy that comes out of that. Out of the pain comes something, Yeah. There's a transformative effect.
Out of the pressure comes a diamond.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So know that whatever you're struggling through or going through is having some sort of transformative effect that's going to benefit you at some other point in your life.
What was the great fighter that said, it could have been Rocky. Adrian. it could have been a line.
Yeah.
It was something like, it doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down.
Yeah.
It's how many times you choose to get up again.
Exactly. Yeah.
I've distorted that. But
yeah, that's Rocky. I think, Yeah, you got to keep coming up, keep fighting. And it does build toughness. It builds resilience. It builds all those qualities, and
sure does.
And if you can see it in that way, then that's good, because you've turned it around into something. As long as it, because it doesn't have to define you. You get to choose how you define. So some people wear victimhood
as their badge of identity,
and then they go through life going, because this happened and that's why, and then they'll attract that relationship or the wrong job or the wrong suit, and they just keep playing that. And that's, you got to be really aware of that. And it's kind of like so disempowering, but at the same time it kind of, because I've been through it as well. You realize that when you get through it, you realize that you are more powerful than you ever thought you were possible. But what's that word? What is it? Dissonance or
dissonance? Is when you're vibrating out of tune.
Yeah. You kind of, it's kind of what you attract. So, but you don't realize it, and you use it as a crutch because you're too afraid maybe of being who you really are and owning your truth. So you keep leaning on and distracting and going back and using it as an excuse. And there are a lot of excuses out there.
As an excuse for poor behaviour or poor decisions.
Poor everything.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's really tough for people to understand, and I battle with this all the time, that your life is 100% your responsibility. So we look at other people to give us love and to give us motivation to do things, and then we blame other things like governments and other things, all this external stuff, when it's all just stuff within you, and it's just all a story you keep repeating, a narrative in your mind, a program that you maybe never have thought to break or to kind of identify or get
disrupt the pattern.
Disrupt and go, hang on. It's me. It's not that other person. It's me. It's always me. It's always been me.
It's always,
And it's scary, because you got to then own your shit.
I know.
But you think you can also own your good stuff as well. So don't forget about that. But it's tough. So there's nowhere to go. There's literally nowhere to go, and then
except face yourself and go inwards.
And that's the real journey for me. It's the journey within yourself, because then you can take control of that stuff that maybe happened, as you were growing up at that school or whatever, whether you were bullied or whatever those things were, you can then turn that around and you can.
Yes. Well, I talk about these things now with a sense of strength, almost a sense of pride. That I went through it, because I feel I've really overcome it, and I feel I'm actually really proud of the man I've become, in spite of those fuckers, and that excites me. That gets me a bit jazzed. I'm like, man, I've done all right, and I think we all have work to continue with psychologically.
Absolutely.
But a lot of those big pieces have really fallen into place for me now. And I've come to be at peace with a lot of it, and proved to myself that I don't have to be defined by the way I was maybe led or made to feel at that time. It's remarkable to me that you and I becoming friends so many years after either of us went to high school, to turn out that you really didn't have a great time at your high school either. It's really quite interesting.
Yeah.
And for me, it actually led me on a spiritual path. I remember I had so much time to myself with no friends to speak of. I found myself in the library one day asking the librarian, do we have any books on ghosts?
I remember you saying that.
I know it's
yeah.
weird, like ghosts,
Wow.
but man, I was 12.
Yeah.
So ghosts were my first foray in stepping into an interest of what is spirituality. I guess we call it ghosts, because the only other shit I knew of was the Anglican church shoved down our throat 3 days a week, you know.
Yeah.
And so ghosts, do we have anything ghost-like? And I think, no, by that time I was more like 14, 15. And
what do you remember what you got? What
I
book?
don't know. I would have got something, and I think I would have been disappointed with what the Anglican school library did possess on the topic of ghosts.
Right.
So I went out, and that time I remember Goody's Bookshop, which was the spiritualist bookshop in Queen Street at the time. I'd go and spend $20 there and read a book about reincarnation.
Yeah.
And that's where that stuff ultimately began for me. And I mean, here we are talking about our spiritual beliefs now. And what is reality.
Yeah, because you need an entry point into that at a young age, unless something, happens to you, whether you start having these inklings or psychic visions or whatever, something tangible might happen. But yeah,
well, there I was, forced with nothing but time to myself for introspection.
Well, I was going to say, it's
so
perfect.
it was not the popular rugby kid who didn't have to think.
Yeah,
I had to think because I was left with nothing but my thoughts, and sometimes they were painful.
Yeah, because the way reality is set up is it's very distracting on the external level, and it's very 5 sense reality, 3D. What's real is you got to be able to see it and feel it and touch it, etc. So that spiritual realm can be so out of reach until you start journeying inward and get bypass the sort of programming in that 5 sense reality and go into the deeper dimensions of things. And I think having supernatural or woo experiences helps, because it can then shift and alter your perception. You start to get curious as to what's going on there, what's happening. But yeah, we are form dancing in the formless. Is that what it is? Is that the saying?
Well, maybe we're the formless dancing in form in this incarnation.
Yeah, that's right. That's what it is.
Hadn't heard that one before. But
not heard that.
But I get you, though. Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty cold up here on the open rooftop that isn't a roof. So I think we might call it a day on this one, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, notice the traffic's really died down. Well, there you go.
Yes, indeed.
All right, everyone. Till next time.